This show is produced by the Hartman Media Company. For more information and links to all our great podcasts, visit hartmanmedia.com.
Welcome to the American Monetary Association's podcast, where we explore how monetary policy impacts the real lives of real people and the action steps necessary to preserve wealth and enhance one's lifestyle.
It's my pleasure to welcome Ben Way. He is the CEO of Digits. He is a cast member of the Bravo TV show Startups, Silicon Valley, featured in the acclaimed documentary The Startup Kids, and author of Jobocalypse, The End of Human Jobs and How Robots Will Replace Them. Ben, welcome. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you.
Good. It's good to have you on the show, and you're coming to us today from Miami, Florida, and I am in Fort Lauderdale, so we are close to each other, but on Skype. So
Indeed.
Yeah, we had a great conversation before we came on the air here. You are doing a lot of interesting, innovative things. First, tell us about Digits, a startup in the crypto space, it looks like, to do with cryptocurrency credit cards. Tell us more.
Yes, indeed. So about 3 years ago, I joined a traditional payments company. And to be quite frank, I knew very, very little about the payments industry. About a year ago, I recognized that there was a huge opportunity in the crypto payment space for a new type of crypto credit card provider that basically allows you to change any credit or debit card in the world, including the ones in your pocket, into a crypto card. And that's exactly what we did. And we came up with this concept of Digits, and we span out the company, and now we're doing an ICO for it. And the really interesting thing about Digits is that we're not issuing any physical credit cards. We're literally converting the credit cards that you have in your pocket right now into crypto cards. So you can choose whether you want it on your credit card, whether you want to pay in crypto. And from a merchant's point of view, they get exactly what they were expecting at exactly the time they were expecting it.
So in other words, if you have a charge that you're doing on any given day and your cryptocurrency that is in the account that would be debited is at a high, or you think it's at a high, then it would be wise to maybe pay with the cryptocurrency versus the dollar, right? You're always arbitraging these two. Gives you that choice?
Absolutely, though one of the amazing things that we have done is that we had to solve the problem, the largest payment problems with crypto, which is volatility and network transmission time, which basically means that a merchant needs to get exactly the amount of money they were expecting at exactly the time they were expecting it. And so we had to solve those problems. And by solving those problems, we actually came up with quite a unique concept called the hedge lending network, which we believe is the first real-time lending platform in the world. And through that, the really interesting thing about Digits is if you swipe that card today and you pay $100 in crypto from your crypto account, you have if you want, you have the option of paying back that transaction 366 days later in fiat and getting any uptick in the value of crypto. So if crypto doubles, then you can actually pay back the original transaction plus a small transaction fee and get the uptick in crypto. So you can actually hedge a year ahead with Digits.
Okay, that's fascinating. So you said you could pay with fiat, I believe, meaning dollars, any fiat currency like a euro or a dollar, or you could pay with the cryptocurrency. But why, Ben? I mean, this is the story that's circulated widely about the 2 pizzas for $82 million or whatever when they're paid with Bitcoin. But why would anyone allow a 366-day float? That is a long option period. There's got to be a decent amount of option consideration to have that long of a period because, wow, it's a long time.
We've actually created a very unique model, which means that in 366 days, you can pay back that transaction in fiat. However, if the market has gone down during that time and it goes past a certain trigger point, then the crypto is automatically liquidated and the lender paid back. So we see that option as kind of being the icing on the cake. of the transaction. If you swipe that card and crypto continues to go up, then you're going to benefit from that. But if crypto goes down and we liquidate it and pay back the lender, then you don't get that facility. But you've still spent the $100 you were expecting to spend at the time you were expecting to spend it. So we kind of see that facility as a side effect of our model. It's not kind of like a core proposition. It's just one of the many benefits. And the other major benefit is that we turn a short-term taxable event into a long-term taxable event that can save up to 30% of the transaction fee in tax. So it's these kind of two huge benefits that actually are just side effects of the way we built the whole system in trying to solve these two big problems, which is volatility and network transmission time. Mm-hmm. And in effect, the way we do that is the hedge lending network is a two-sided marketplace, and the hedge lending network itself takes the risk.
Mm-hmm. How do you turn any card into a cryptocurrency card, though? Is it simply because, I mean, I don't do anything with my American Express card in my wallet or my Visa or my MasterCard in my wallet. You do something with a back-end account, right? I don't.
Yes.
I don't even talk to my credit card issuer about this, right?
No, exactly. So the easiest way to explain it is that we kind of interrupt the payment before it gets to the Visa, MasterCard networks, and we check whether it's a crypto registered card. But the really important thing is we still settle the transaction across the Visa, MasterCard networks. So we play very nicely with Visa, MasterCard. We're not trying to take them out of the loop. We actually leverage the value of their transactional network. And that's a very big differentiator for us, because by settling on the Visa, MasterCard networks, it means that we don't actually have to deal with single merchants. From a merchant's point of view, it is just a normal credit card transaction. So it means that we can integrate at much higher levels, and all the merchants below, you know, who are attached to that automatically are part of the Digits program. And literally, we don't have to sign any new agreements or anything, because we're just settling the transaction exactly the way
they expected it to be.
Settled.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Oh, very interesting. Very interesting model. Good stuff. I want to leave the topic of digits if we can and talk about your book, because I think it's a fascinating topic. But before we do that, is there anything else you want us to know about digits or cryptocurrencies?
Not really. Just if you're interested, check out the digits.io website. We're in pre-ICO right now. We're about to launch with RenGen Labs. And we want to build a really long-term valuable business.
Fantastic. Okay, so the future of jobs. I tell you, I have made many very good predictions on my podcast over the years, Ben. The one I have been a miserable failure at is interest rates. But hey, you know, everything else has come true, so that's all right. If you didn't win the interest rate game with me, that's fine. But the rental market, the real estate market, all of that stuff, I've been pretty good at all of that. But the one thing I am really struggling with is the future of robotics and automation. And here's the reason I struggle with this. And, you know, your book is addressing this topic very specifically. But, you know, if you look at every innovation over the course of history, people have always been in fear that they would lose their job, that massive amounts of people would be displaced, that there would be economic collapse, etc. And that has never really happened. Looking at the census for the last maybe 50 years or so, the only job out of all job categories they cover that has gone away because of technology is elevator operator. We do operate our own elevators nowadays, so we don't need the guy sitting in there, you know, picking our floor. But everything else is still there, really, right? But I wonder if this time it's different. And the reason I wonder is that, okay, self-driving cars, autonomous vehicles, the transportation industry is one of the biggest industries on Earth. But the people that drive your Lyft and your Uber and your delivery truck, they're not going to learn robotics. Will they just all be displaced into jobs we can't even imagine yet? I don't know. What will happen? What will come of this? Massive unemployment or, massive prosperity?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few ways of looking at this. So first of all, the data that you're looking for on who lost their jobs because of technology and automation actually is there. It's just hidden. And one of the analysis I did in my books, and where I believe it's hidden, is the amount of time for an economic recession to recover. So if you look at all the recessions from the beginning of this century, every recession has taken twice as long as the previous recession to recover. And the reason for that is that when an economy is growing, it becomes inherently more inefficient, and organizations don't want to change and they don't want to optimize. They're just happy they're making money, and they don't focus resources on efficiency. When you go into a recessionary dip, what happens is that organizations have to become more efficient, and they automate and re-automate. And what happens is that it takes twice as long each time that happens for the jobs to come back to the same level, because what you're seeing is actually that slack. So my belief is in the next recession, whenever that may be, is you're going to have a horrific recession which we may not recover from on a jobs basis, where you kind of hit a point of no return for jobs. And, I think, I do think the next major recession is probably going to be that point. And, you mentioned about the elevator operator, but actually there's thousands of hidden jobs that have disappeared. For instance, we used to fly planes with 2 pilots and an engineer. Mm-hmm. It had to be every single plane.
Now it's just 2 pilots.
Just 2 pilots. And so, we're getting to these points of efficiency where, just because something hasn't happened in the past doesn't necessarily mean it's not going to happen in the future.
Sure.
And innovation has been on a kind of quite a linear curve. And at some point, it's going to break the system of labor. And then coming back to your point, then there's 2 points of view. And I'm ever the optimist. So say, well, if we're lucky, we'll be treated like well looked after pets. Where life will be so good, because what people forget with automation and AI and all that is the cost of everything decreases, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So, medical, the cost of medical, if everything's being done through technology,
it's very deflationary, no question about it. Yeah.
Exactly. So there may be a balance that can be obtained, but I suspect before we get to that balance, there will be a huge amount of social unrest before we get there.
You may be right. I mean, the prognosticators are predicting things like 47% unemployment from these mega shifts that are coming our way. Technology it feels like, and maybe it felt this way, Ben, when the steam engine was invented or the light bulb. I don't know. But right now, it feels like we're about to see a huge change in the world through technology, because we've had this networked world for 25 years or so, right? And it just keeps compounding the effects of it. So maybe it's like looking at the chart, the graph, and seeing that hockey stick of this exponential change. Certainly Peter Diamandis is talking about things like that very positively from his perspective. But I don't know. Let's look at the table of contents in your book, and maybe I'll just give you some fodder for conversation here. So I can't help but notice chapter number 3, the adult industry.
Everyone loves the sex chapter.
Right. Hey, listen, we're all human. What are you talking about there? I mean, I want to think that maybe you're talking about dating sites and virtual reality.
I'm
and
sex
things.
bots.
Yeah.
Having sex with robots and the sex industry and, how we're falling in love with robots and how there's no reason we won't fall in love. If we can fall in love with animals, we can certainly fall in love with the robots.
Right.
Those psychological studies are already proving that under the right circumstances, humans can form pretty strong emotional bonds with robots.
Wow.
So,
interesting.
It's fascinating. I think the real question behind this, so it could have great effects, like it could stop sex trafficking. It could really free a lot of people who are very lonely.
Yep.
What was that mass murderer, that kid in California that shot up?
In Santa Barbara.
10, Santa Barbara. He shot up 10 people because, girls said no to him, right?
Yep.
Sex is important. It's part of the human condition.
Right, sure.
We need it.
Yeah.
So it can have some very, very positive outcomes. But more fascinating side for me is, and this is just from an interest level, is psychological and moral issues behind it. For instance, is having sex with a sex bot, is that being unfaithful to your partner?
Yeah.
If you create a robot that looks like a child, is that pedophilia?
Oh,
and if it is
interesting.
pedophilia, is it better that a pedophile
have an outlet,
uses
right.
a robot or a human?
Yeah.
So there's all these kind of interesting moral dilemmas that humans are going to have to grapple with in the next 10 years about their morality and what it is to be human.
Just look at the world of online dating, for example. Can every date just be a virtual date? Will people even be meeting in person? Because with virtual reality and all of these different technologies, it's really, it begs the question of what is real. It literally begs the question. And if anybody saw the movie from a long time ago, Altered States, where they explored these planes of reality based on these psychedelic drugs, right? It's an interesting concept, and philosophers and sages, for thousands of years have been asking these same questions, but very interesting. So what about logistics and hard drives? What about that?
So logistics is actually something that's quite personal space to me, because we actually own a last mile logistics company called Shipsy. And Shipsy is all focused in this big revolution that we're about to see, where all logistics will be on demand. Mm-hmm. So, my belief is that, the way that logistics is done now is going to change rapidly in the next 15 years. And once self-driving comes in, almost everything will be delivered in real time. And the way I kind of explain this is that, retail is effectively dying right now. And so what replaces it? And my belief is that you will have effectively, retail locations will become showrooms. And by the time you've walked through that showroom and you've chosen what you want, by the time you get home, it will already be at your door. It won't be, you won't take it home with you. It will come from a central distribution point, and it will already be at your house. So retail just becomes a showroom.
Not to mention that it may be 3D printed, right?
Well, indeed. And that's the other, the material revolution is coming as well. And you've got all these kind of connected but disparate industries right now of AI, robotics, crypto, automation, machine learning, and they're all kind of coming together in one single thread. And this is why my belief is it almost becomes exponential as these technologies converge in the impact they will have on us.
Yeah, it's really quite an amazing and interesting time to be alive. Pick another category or chapter in the book and tell us about that, if you would.
One of the very interesting aspects is what's going to happen with police and warfare. Mm-hmm. We already live in what most people would consider 50 years ago a surveillance state, right? Everything we do is tracked, and Google probably knows more about me than the police, right? So you got this crazy kind of society shift where we live in a surveillance state, but we don't really feel it. But I think, as robotic technology comes in and you have these robotic drones and these robotic enforcers, yes, I think that's obviously going to have a huge impact, beneficial impact in terms of crime. But I also think it's going to make us feel very claustrophobic as a society.
Right. And,
one of the beautiful things about America, and one of the differences between the UK and the US, and one of the things I love about the US, is that you feel free. There is this sense of, I am responsible for my own destiny. And I worry that technology, not just surveillance technology, but all technology, is effectively eroding our sense of humanity and ourselves. Mm-hmm. We're thinking less, and we're becoming more of a kind of crowd that and one of the things I'm hearing or seeing as a psychological effect of this is that kids growing up today are far more risk adverse.
Right.
than any other generation because they have all the information at their fingertips. So they don't really have to discover anything.
Right.
And there's always a risk in discovery.
Right.
And one of the things that is also happening, which coming back to your comment earlier about, whether anybody will ever need to date in the real world, if you look at the trend that's happening in Japan,
that's really sad. What's going on in Japan is sad. From the male perspective, these men are just not interested in dating. And then the women are marrying themselves. They're having these solo weddings. It's the weirdest thing ever. Yeah, have you seen that? It's crazy.
Yeah, but it is crazy, but it's also, in a sense, not. Meeting humans in the real world is both scary and hard work.
Sure.
And we're a beautiful species, but we're also a pretty lazy species.
Yeah, no question.
And so, this technology, it is sad. It's sad they don't get to have the spectrum of experience. But this, what we're seeing in Japan, I think is probably the future trend for most of humanity, where we become these isolated beacons because we have life so easy that we don't really need to go and explore. Sex is on an app, food is on an app, whatever you want is on an app. Why do you go anywhere else than stay at home?
This scares me, Ben. I got to tell you, this scares me. It really does. That seems very sad. But I agree with you that it may well be the future. Sadly, we shall see how it all turns out.
It may just be a stepping stone in our future. I'm generally very positive about humanity, and I think that we can get to the other side. And I think that there is an opportunity for technology to greatly enrich our lives, and maybe even give us the time and the ability to have a new Renaissance period. Right. But I think that there's going to be some really short-term negative effects in the next kind of 30 years before we get there. Yeah,
it's going to be a very, very interesting transition. One of the things you mentioned about kids being risk averse, so you look at the millennial generation, and I would agree with you because, when you can get the information, you don't need to actually perform the experiment. But there are several bad sides of that, of course, as you know. Number one is that a lot of times you discover something accidentally during the experiment. We've all heard the story of the 3M Post-it notes and a million other stories like that. So by doing the thing, we actually learn something, and we might discover something by accident, right? So that's one element. But the other element is it harkens back to, I remember many years ago reading John Nesbitt, the futurist who wrote Megatrends 2000. He used to be a pretty prolific author. He talked about how it was easier many times back in the day for a scientist to just perform an experiment again because we were drowning in this sea of information. Well, now, fast forward a couple decades, and Google and other forces have organized that information so well and made it indexed very well. Now we can find the information without doing the experiment at all. So it's interesting how that equation flipped, right? From what you're saying. It's a fascinating point you make, but it does make people more risk averse, just like you said, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that generally when it comes to education, there's two things we get wrong. And the first is that we teach subjects. We don't teach children how to learn.
Right.
To learn how to learn is one of the greatest assets you can give a child, because once you have that ability, you can go off and do anything. And then the second is that and I get it, I get from a parental point of view, but we are living in a society now that mollycoddle our children so much.
Oh, yeah. With helicopter parenting. Yeah, it's terrible.
Yeah, there's no chance for a child to really understand risk and how important learning risk is, because a risk itself is not a risk. It's the evaluation of that risk that's the risk. So, and what I mean there is that risk itself is good. You need to risk things in life to achieve things. But what we need to teach kids is how to evaluate those risks responsibly, not take them.
Right. Very good points. Just wrap it up for us with the last chapter in your book, Humans and the Crumbs Left for Us. That doesn't sound very optimistic. And you don't have to be an optimist, by the way. It's okay.
I am. I mean, my book was deliberately controversial in that sense. And I think as you actually read it, you get a sense that there is optimism. And I do believe that we are a fantastically diverse and interesting species. And I think, we will, especially in the creative areas of art, music, and films, and, we will always have a role, though maybe not as big as we imagine right now.
Yeah, you've probably seen that video about how music and poetry and, of course, writing can all be done by AI. We're on the verge of that. So I don't know. Yeah. Do we need to be involved?
Exactly. But, my belief is that we will probably end up as kind of a hybrid of technology and humanity. And I think what you're actually seeing, if I break it really down to what I think is happening in society or as a civilization, is I think we're almost splitting as a civilization into two species. And that's not biological, that's actually informational. And so you've got part of the species that accepts technology and is going to get more and more integrated to the point where you can't be unintegrated and survive, which we're pretty much there. I mean, most people can survive without their phone for any duration of time these days. And we're going to get a whole swathe of society that rebels against technology because they're not part of it.
Right.
And actually, I'm funny enough, I've just written a new book, which is actually my first piece of fiction, but it's about a lady inventor who discovers artificial consciousness set about 30 years in the future, and how she has to protect this artificial consciousness. But the fundamental aspect of this artificial consciousness is that it has all the qualities we attribute to God. So it can see the past, it can predict the future, it can answer almost any question. And it's kind of like this amazing it's actually a kind of spiritual, technological combination of what the future could be.
Yeah, really interesting. Good stuff. Well, Ben, give out your website. Maybe do you have a separate author website besides Digits, for your books and so forth?
Yeah, you can always find me at Rainmakers Global, which is my holding company. Pretty accessible. So just, ping me on one of the million channels that I'm probably active on.
Fantastic. Ben Way, thank you so much for joining us.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for listening. Please be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss any episodes. Be sure to check out the show's specific website and our general website, hartmanmedia.com, for appropriate disclaimers and terms of service. Remember that guest opinions are their own, and if you require specific legal or tax advice or advice in any other specialized area, please consult an appropriate professional. And we also very much appreciate you reviewing the show. Please go to iTunes or Stitcher Radio or whatever platform you're using and write a review for the show. We would very much appreciate that. And be sure to make it official and subscribe so you do not miss any episodes. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode.